It's awards season. With B&G.
It's been 1 week since the Spiel des Jahres nominations have been announced, and now that the dust has settled, let's talk a bit about those. Owing to an unexpected chain of events that any rational person could only describe as divine intervention, I've actually managed to play all nominations before the announcement. So here is the definitive perfect information take on the Spiel des Jahres jury's picks for games that may be worth looking at 2017. As always, keep in mind that this is a German jury talking about games that have been in national distribution in Germany in the last 12 months or so. So some games are missing from the list that may appear in 2018, and some games are missing from the nominations list and the recommendations list because the jury just didn't think they were particularly good. That of course brings up the question, what does the jury consider a good game? They've been rather secretive and non-committal about the criteria, leading to gamers making all kinds of speculations and assumptions about what makes a Spiel des Jahres winner. The jury has been all over the map historically, much to the consternation of people who want the award to be more than a purchasing recommendation for grandparents and distant relatives of gamers. According to their own website, the Spiel des Jahres jury aims to promote gaming within the family and society in general. While there are many examples of the jury awarding games aimed at families that play together, last year's winner, Codenames by Vlade Chvátil, was an explicit step towards promoting board games outside of the family unit and pushing games towards something that brings people together that aren't blood relatives. That said, let's talk about this year's nominees and how they measure up to this goal. The nominations are Kingdomino by Bruno Cathala, Magic Maze by Kasper Lapp, and Wettlauf nach Eldorado by Rainer Knizia. Let me start off by saying that all three games are very good, which has not always been the case with these nominations. But this year the games chosen are of consistently high quality. The designs are polished, they are above all accessible games with a quick learning curve when it comes to getting you to play them. Some are arguably easier to master than others, but when we talk about mastery there's always the Kennerspiel des Jahres. So Kingdomino, Bruno Cathala's tile-laying game in which you try to fill a 5x5 space with domino tile-shaped tiles, showing various types of landscapes. This game has surely been dismissed as mindless fluff by many due to its art direction, but has quite likely made its way onto the nomination list for the very same reason. It's in many ways the least surprising nomination of the three. The presentation is bright and happy, components are thick enough even for children's hands, and the rules are very simple, thereby dispelling any notion that a board game may be too complicated and too much hard work to enjoy. Kingdomino is neither. It's light, it's straightforward and easy on the eyes. Its closest relative may be Uwe Rosenberg's Patchwork, but opened up to players who might be intimidated by the tactical and strategic depth of that game. Which is not to say that Kingdomino is shallow. There are interesting choices to be made. Your pick of tiles each turn needs to take into account how it affects turn order and how much you want to keep your opponents from getting a good tile. It simply works. There's little to no fat to the game. It invites immediate replays because of the little puzzling work that goes into not wasting space in your grid. It's a good game. Very good, even if you're playing with soon-to-be gamers. It's an introduction to board gaming as a pleasant and not too stressful activity. The second nomination is Magic Maze, a real-time cooperative game that relies on limiting communication with your teammates to create that unique cooperative experience. Much like Kingdomino, the presentation is bright and happy, albeit a little more busy. The tiles you lay out as you explore the maze, which happens to be a Fantasyland shopping mall, don't ask, are full of neat and fun details that you never have the time to appreciate. It's a remarkably clever game centered on moving your 4 character pieces through the corridors of the shopping mall maze, with the first wrinkle being that every player may only move characters in one direction, north, south, east or west. Any character, any number of times as long as they don't run into a wall. but only in one direction. That's where you need to coordinate with the other players, before the send timer runs out. This is the second clever bit of the game, in that it puts pressure on the coordination between players. You can't argue, explain, or quarterback your way to victory. You need to make a decision fast, which leads us to the third clever twist of the game. Outside of special circumstances you need to arrange to happen, you may only communicate by placing a big, red, oversized player piece in front of a player. That's it. No talking, no nudging, no moaning, groaning, or head shaking. No vivid pointing at the character you want sooner to move. Nothing. And this is where Magic Maze becomes something special. This ban on communication reframes the challenge in players' heads. Instead of thinking about, how do I get to where I need to be, you find yourself asking, how can I help others? How can I contribute to us winning? You need to infer other people's intent. You need to get into their heads. You need to see the game from their perspective. Nothing exemplifies the potential of games as a social and cultural catalyst than when they make us want to understand other people. Considering that the game is actually fairly complex, it is somewhat surprising that it didn't end up on the Kennerspiel des Jahres list. And I think the reason for this is not immediately apparent. In a decision that is either amazingly canny or ingenious happenstance, the rulebook covers only the most basic rules I mentioned above, and then introduces a new rule with every game you play, not unlike a legacy game. But by doing so, it allows the group to include as much complexity as they feel comfortable with. This way, Magic Maze can be a game that a wide range of gaming groups can easily enjoy. Where Kingdomino trades some depth for accessibility, Magic Maze parcels out its complexity over the number of games you play. And as soon as you're ready to level up, there are additional rules waiting for you to include. Finally, Wettlauf nach Eldorado, a return to form for Rainer Knizia, the designer I consider the grandmaster of German board game design. His skill in fusing strategic depth and tactical challenge with easily grasped and quickly mastered rules is amazing. Games like Lost Cities, Ingenious, Battle Line, or Modern Art are exemplary in how they sneak deep and complex challenges past the player's mental defenses to actually start to think for their entertainment. And while his background in mathematics is often felt in his games, which can grow a little tiring for some players, there is a distinct design ethos of favoring clean, compact, and elegant rule systems over the cheap thrills of a tacked-on dice roll or some random event cards. In Wettlauf nach Eldorado, you're racing through the jungles and past the desert, across the river, over the mountains, and then turn left at the kebab stand to reach Eldorado, using a solid, if uninspiring, deck-building mechanism. The various types of terrain challenge your deck in different ways, forcing you to spend turns standing still as you purchase and remove cards from your deck, while the others race past you. It is oddly reminiscent of Lewis and Clark, as if this was an introductory variant of it. One that gets rid of everything that doesn't directly affect your race across America, north or south. And despite that trade-off in complexity, this game doesn't feel as if untold depths have been abandoned to make it playable. Your objectives are neatly parceled out over the modular board. There is never a question as to what you should focus on next. The progression of other players is always of interest to you, as placement on the map can be weaponized to force another player into taking a more difficult and slower route. This game is without a doubt very good. And yet, I think the nomination is a mistake. Or at the very least, it is a terribly conservative decision that seems to put a household name and familiarity of experience over games that actually promote gaming as an activity that evolves over time. One that invites people of all ages to revisit a pastime they might only have vague, unfavorable recollections of from their childhood. The tension during play, whether to fall back to gather resources or to push forward by any means, isn't far removed from the experience you get from playing Celtis, another Knizia game and Spiel des Jahres winner of 2008. The difference is merely in flavor but not in type. And while I appreciate that we've moved from deck building as a game concept, as in Dominion, Spiel des Jahres winner 2009, to deck building as a mechanism, I am not convinced that the fact that a good designer used it sensibly puts it in the running for German Game of the Year. So there you have it, my take on the Spiel des Jahres nominees 2017. All of which are good games, worth discovering and worth playing.
Sitting here, as I often do on mellow spring afternoons, watching the tide coquettishly tickling the shore, my mind is left to wonder, to muse and postulate on many things. Who am I is thought more often than you would think for a person who the state would consider in possession of their faculties. What am I doing here? Often dances across the undulations of my cerebella, but today, on this glorious day when the heat has penetrated my time-addled mind, my thoughts are drawn towards the act of being a connoisseur. This is because it is my obligation to give my thoughts on the Kennerspiel des Jahres, the award that is supposed to be ours. It is the award that provokes the most consternation simply because it is supposed to be ours, yet we can't help but feel that the award panel just doesn't get us, you know? The award always skews towards the light end of the heavy, and there is a feeling that so many great titles are overlooked simply because of their weight, and these are exactly the games that should be recognised as games for the connoisseur. The connoisseur works, devotes the precious seconds of their life into knowing the field, and there is a feeling that the Kennerspiel fails where other prizes like the Deutsche Spielpreis succeed because there seems to be a slavish adherence to the maxim of accessibility. And that's for the main prize, and if that's for the main prize, then what's the bloody point? Part of me agrees. I'm not sure that the Kennerspiel is really for me. It's more of a primer for the next step, and that's fine. It serves a purpose. I don't believe that the Spiel des Jahres is a pure prize. It's not simply about the best games, it's about proselytization. And if we can get to grips with that as a concept, then the Kennerspiel feels less of a con. Remember, it rarely, if ever, is about you. So to the games. The three fall into three separate categories of recollection for me. Fresh, dimly remembered and horrific flashback, the latter being the form of memory that has the biggest bang for your buck, especially if you're just dying to try out those new incontinence pants. So let's get the unpleasantness out of the way first. If you listened to last week's episode, you will know my opinions on Exit the Game, the escape room simulator from Cosmos. These are a series of puzzles in a box framed by a flimsy locked-in-a-room idea that seeks to simulate a visceral, tactile experience by placing you in the realm of the pound shop puzzle book. If you want to know why the game turned my stomach, then listen to our review. But it's not the blatant disregard for our future progeny that I want to tackle here, but the fact that it shouldn't have been nominated for a game award, as it's not really a game. I'm sure there are many that would find the puzzles fun, whose brains are configured in that way, and yes, some of them are ingenious, but there is a reason that Kevin Keegan's Big Book of Sudoku doesn't grace our table every game night, and that's because simply solving puzzles is not a game, and checking to see how long it took and then throwing yourself a couple of points is not a game either. Exit the Game has all the peril and tension of crochet class in the latest hipster flat white dispensary. It shouldn't win, but because the heavenly spheres often conspire to irk me as much as possible, it probably will. Also, which version has been nominated? There's like a million out. Now, I've played Raiders of the North Sea. I definitely have. 2 years ago when it came out. It's a quirk of the SDJ that it is only when it's released in Germany that dictates the eligibility of the award. Quirkle, for instance, had been out in America since 1936, a full 200 years before it won the award in 2011. Therefore, I would imagine there is some scratching of heads as to why a game released in 2015 could be up for this year's awards, but it is, and so I'm forced to dredge my memory to be able to talk about Raiders of the North Sea. I remember it being good. I remember it had a refreshing take on the worker placement idea. Here you would place a worker, do their action, and remove another one and do that action. Much more I don't really recall. I do remember it was beautiful and light. Too light, in fact, for this award, even if this contradicts what I said earlier. This is a little more taxing than Lords of Waterdeep, but not much more, and while the game is good, it's clear what the favourite for the Kennerspiel is, and it's the game I would like to see take home the prize, because it's a game that connoisseurs are very het up about. This is, of course, Terraforming Mars. The adoration for this game far outstrips the game itself, but this colonisation, card management, economic mind twister is good and deep, and the people's choice, which is why it won't win. I like Terraforming Mars. I played it once against experienced players and won. This almost never happens. The game has lots of great decisions and it's tense and crunchy. I hate to take that elements but haven't played it enough to decide if I really hate them, or that the glee with which the others played them on me coloured my judgment. I could go into a lengthy explanation of the mechanics, but you all know what the game is. There are games that get under my skin, games that make me marvel at the mind that could have created such intricate exquisiteness, games that make my pulse race and my skin dampen. Terraforming Mars isn't one of them, but it is very good, and out of the nominees, it's the one I hope wins. I hope because then the prize can be ours, a prize for the gamers. For 1 year at least. Thank you for your indulgence, your time, and at some point, I'm sure, your money. I hope Georgios has clarified something for you, and I have at least made you turn up the corners of your mouth occasionally, and whoever takes home the prize this year, always hold on to the thought that you could have made a better choice. Good night. Fare thee well.